Now, we've taught you that management is representing the equity holders, and all their decisions are on behalf of the equity holders. So here's a problem that looks at the return to those equity holders, or return on equity. Again, it involves a look at the income statement and trying to find out where is it that we're going to draw our information. Now, part of this is coming from the income statement, certainly in terms of performance. So when we talk about ROE, ROE is looking at the net income, the income statement figure, relative to the level of equity, and the equity is going to be coming from the balance sheet. Now, this problem has Barton Limited. Its return on equity last year was only 4%, but its management has developed a new operating plan designed to improve things. Under the new plan, the total debt ratio will be 50%, with interest charges of $250,000 per year. Projections for sales are $9 million, with EBIT projected to be $1.2 million. Total asset turnover of 2.5 times. Under these conditions, the tax rate will be 34%. If the changes are made, what return on equity will the company earn? So what we're going to be looking for here to come up with this return on equity is we want to know what is the net income figure we're going to get relative to the level of the equity. Okay, so we need that relationship that goes on right there. In order to figure that out, the equity is going to be everything except out of the assets that's not debt. So we're interested in the amount of the equity as the denominator here, and so we're going to need to first find assets. When we have that, we're going to say, well, let's take those assets, and we're going to multiply that by 1 minus the percentage of those assets that's in the form of debt. So over here, the debt ratio of 50%. So once we find these things, we're going to be able to work our way through to come up with that. To find out what the level of assets are going to be, there we have a relationship between sales and assets, or what was known as total asset turnover. Since we've got sales of $9 million and sales divided by assets are equal to 2.5 times, then if we were to take our sales figure and divide that by this ratio, what we'll find is that our level of assets is $3.6 million. Since 50% is debt and then 50% is equity, then $1.8 million is in the form of equity. Once we can find what the net income is from the income statement, then we'll be able to come up with the final figure here on the new return on equity. So let's see what we have to begin with. We start off here, and it does indeed tell us what the level of sales are. So our income statement has some information that's involved right there. It also tells us something about the old, the old level of return on equity. And so what we had here was a 4% rate in terms of what it used to be. Here we've got interest charges are going to be $250,000. So when we look in here at what the interest expense is going to be, and let's go ahead since we're going to have that as an expense, we'll have in here that there's $250,000. Our EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes, are given here at $1.2 million. So if I take my EBIT and subtract out the interest payments, in other words, put those two things together, so I'm going to just sum those two things up, I find that my earnings before taxes is $950,000. Now my tax burden is at a 34% rate, so I'm going to subtract out that 34% rate times my earnings before taxes of $950,000. So if I take the 950 minus this 323, in other words, add those two cells together, what I come up with is a net income figure of $627,000, and therefore $620,000 divided by 1.8 million is a return on equity of 34.83%. So coming from an old plan that was only 4% that was given up here, that is a fairly dramatic improvement.